What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with how to make Major League Baseball projections, the long overdue update to a video that I created, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. It's been viewed tens of thousands of times. I've gotten lots of great emails about it. This is the update. If I were to build them today, here's how I would do it. So a lot of similar things where we're going to look at a player's recent form, the ballpark that they're in, the opponent that they are facing, for example, but we're doing things in a much more efficient manner. Also, it is going to be a lot easier to update. All of the data sources are being pulled in from the web, so it's like a one-click refresh to kind of update this thing. This is going to run you through start to finish on how to make MLB projections. It's very long. In the description below, I'm linking to my courses page. This same YouTube video is going to be available in the form of a course, meaning that when you get to natural endpoints of segments, you can stop and save your progress, etc. That can be a little difficult on YouTube, so I'm linking you to the course in the description below. That course is free. So what you see here on YouTube is going to be free. It's just in the course version. And then also there is kind of a next step advanced course that I'm offering, which you will also find in the description below, which is going to get into more features of the spreadsheet, things that you have asked me about over the course of the last 4 years, like bringing in live Vegas odds, bringing in weather information, live lineups into the tab so you can see where a player is batting in the lineup that evening. And then we're even going to do some floor and ceiling stuff just so that you don't have just projections. You can see a player's floor, projected points for tonight, and then their ceiling. So that's all in the advanced course. It's a ton of content. I hope you enjoy. All right, so let's get into this. I have a blank Excel workbook right here in front of me, and before you know it, this is going to be full of Major League Baseball projections that are updating it when you tell it to update. It's just going to be awesome. So let's hop right into this. And the first thing that I want to do is start populating the data that we're going to need. That's step one. So remember, we are going to be looking at a player's recent form. We are going to be looking at, for hitters, the pitching matchup that they have, and then obviously for pitchers, the team matchup that they have, and the ballpark that the game is played in for this version of the spreadsheet. And then after that, if you want to go more advanced, we're going to talk about lineups and weather and Vegas odds and maybe some more and different things. But for now, let's just get some of the data in here, and I'm going to start exclusively with hitters. So in Major League Baseball, they're basically going to be two separate tabs, two separate projection models, one for pitchers and one for hitters. So let's start with the hitters first, and we're going to pull in the salary information from DraftKings. Now, in the past, if you've watched my old How to Make MLB Projections video, this was probably the worst part. We were copying and pasting this from the Excel or from the export file on DraftKings every single day. Well, it's been a few years and I have a much better way to do this. So what I recommend you do is you go into DraftKings and navigate to the contest that you want to play. So for my purposes for projections, I basically want as many games as possible. So if I look through the different slates here, I'm going to ignore the showdown slates. This right here is the night slate that starts at 5:05. This is the 1:05 slate. This one right here has 10 games. This is like the largest slate that they have, depending on the time of day. If I got here a little earlier, I might have gotten an all-day slate, but let's just roll with this. So what I'm going to do is I can click any one of these contests, and I'll just click this $44. And normally in the past, I would have said, okay, export this to a CSV. We would have downloaded this and we would have pasted it in. But what I found out is a little bit of a trick here where if you, just like any, I mean, this is just a regular URL. This is the type of URL that I, would grab from a lot of different places. I'm just going to right click on this and I'm going to copy the link address. And I'm going to put this in the book, in my browser bar, and we'll see what this looks like. So if I bring this down and I'll open a new tab, and you'll see when I paste this in, This is the URL that is going to tell DraftKings to download the CSV. So you'll see it just says DraftKings.com/lineup, get available players CSV. And then it has these. So it has contest type ID and draft group ID. So let's start with draft group ID. This, to me, the way that I understand this, 26828 is what DraftKings uses to define the slate that I chose, which is that 10-game slate. So remember, 26828. So if I go back to the lobby here, you'll see when I put filters on 10 games, there are two numbers up here, 26828 and 26846. So there's actually two different types of contests, it appears, within this 10-game slate. I'm not exactly sure what the difference between them is. Oh, one is probably tiers. That's exactly what it is. One is tiers, and one is the classic model, okay? So that's what we're looking at. If I click tonight, you'll see that number will change. Now it's 26842. So if I were to change the end of my URL to 26842, it would only pull me the night players in that player pool. I believe that the contest type ID 28 is classic. So if I make this a showdown slate, let me see if I can do this really quick. This should be a showdown slate. Hold on one second. Let's try this. Let's do showdown. And then I'll enter a showdown. And I'll grab this URL. I believe this is how they do this. Yeah, so contest type for Major League Baseball Showdown is 114. So depending on what you want, you can kind of go through and see and kind of set this up to pool for you. Now, I'm not sure if this changes every day. We're going to have to keep an eye on this. So for our purposes, I already have what I want. I have my correct draft group. I have my correct contest ID, 26828. So what you might just need to do each day is come into DraftKings, go back into the lobby, navigate to Major League Baseball, and then find whichever slate that you want to create projections for. I'm not sure if 26828 is always going to be like the largest slate of the day. If it is, that's great. We're never going to have to change the URL. But worst case scenario, we just change the little, that little 5-digit code every day, and it's going to pull in all of our players. So let's take that. This is the URL that I want, so I've just copied that, and I'm going to take it back into Excel, and I'm going to use Power Query to pull this. Power Query is built into Microsoft Excel. It is built into the newer versions of Microsoft Excel. I believe if you have anything after 2016, it's almost certainly default. If you have an older version, you can just Google Power Query for Excel and you can download it becomes a plugin. I'm not sure if this is available on Macs. There has been a little bit of some back and forth on this. It looks like Microsoft is planning on supporting it. So I guess depending on when you're watching this, it may or may not be supported, but it is definitely supported on Windows PCs. It's Power Query. Additionally, I have an entire course of how to use Power Query to scrape sports stats. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details in this video about it. I'm just going to use it and show you what to do. If you want the in-depth version, which is super awesome, I have a course for that. Go back to the mains course page. All right, so we're going to go to data and we're going to get data, and I can either drop it down and do get data from the web, or I can just click here and say from the web. And I'm going to paste in that DraftKings URL. And I know you're saying, Rick, but it's a CSV. And I'm saying, I know that, but Power Query can still handle it because it's awesome. So I'll just click OK and let this run through. And it's going to ask me what level of security do I want to apply to this. We can just be anonymous for DraftKings. We don't need a login here. It should pull regardless. Okay, so this is a pretty good sign. So if you watch that other course that I have, you'll see what to kind of do here. But it's great. It has recognized this file from DraftKings. 118,000 bytes, and it's asking, how do you want to open this? So we're going to say, well, just open it as a CSV. That is how it is intended to be opened. We can work with that. So we're just going to do a CSV, and boom, we have our salaries for today. Just to cross-reference this to make sure that we have the same thing, I'll go back into my DraftKings lobby here. We'll open up one of these contests, and, Max Scherzer, I guess I'll remove the probables here. 10,900, Verlander 10,008, Snell 10,005, Scherzer 10,009, Verlander 10,008, Snell 10,005. I've got the correct date on here, so this looks perfect. So now what I've done is I've created essentially a digital web connection to the player pool in DraftKings to grab all of the DraftKings information that I am going to need. So this is already an excellent step one. Just looking at this, it looks like Power Query has identified the things that I need here. So I've got player ID, salary as a whole number, name as a text. That's perfect. So I'm just going to rename this. I'm just going to call this salaries. And I am going to close and load this. And you'll see it'll load into my spreadsheet all that information that I just pulled. Now, if you know anything about me and you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I'm going to have to format this. I hate the way it looks. So I'm just going to quickly, center these and make these a little bit smaller so that I can see here. Like I don't need all this. Position, we can probably get rid of some of this stuff later, but just so I can see it all at once, I'll come back and do some color stuff later. And then I'm just going to change the name of the tab to, again, the same thing that I named the query, which is salaries. All right, I've got the salaries in here. Let's go grab, we'll just go with recent form. So I'm just going to go to Fangraphs. Fangraphs is really easy to grab, and it's really easy to work with in Power Query. So this is the place that I'm going to go. I'm going to use Fangraphs as much as possible. Baseball Reference additionally is great, but Fangraphs is probably updated a bit more, and it's probably a little bit easier. So we're going to use Fangraphs. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the batting leaders for 2019, and it's going to give me the batting leaders. A couple things here, and I talk about this much more in depth in the course, but this is only currently showing me the top 30 hitters when I know that there's 180 qualified players. We're going to fix that. But first of all, I want the standard tab here, which is more like hits, doubles, triples, home runs, because these are the items that are actually more associated with DraftKings scoring than things like, a hard hit percentage or something like that, which we might talk about in the advanced version of this later. But for now, let's just get DraftKings scoring and recent performance into the spreadsheet. So this is the fields that I want to pull over here. So I'm going to grab this URL, but before I do that, if I grab this URL, I'm only going to get 30 players at a time. I know there's 180. So I'll change the page size to 50. And this is a little trick I talk, again, more about in that other course. Now I'm seeing the 50 players, which all it is designated by this URL here. So it's basically now telling you 1 to 50. I'm going to change this to 1 to 1,000 so that I get all of the players that are currently qualified and will ever become qualified this season. So I'm never going to have to change this URL out. So right now, if I scroll down, I now have all 186 players on one page, and I've left myself room for more players to qualify. Now, you have to kind of decide here, where do you want to draw the line? I like qualified players because we have a large enough sample size. These guys have played enough games or have at-bats versus the correct number of games. If you open this up to, minimum plate appearances is only 10, you're going to get a lot more players. You're going to get 483, but your projections are going to be much, much, much more volatile. Like Brandon Woodruff would be one of the highest projected players every single day because he's batting 429. He's got a couple extra base hits. The projections are going to be a little bit off. So understand that if you go this route, I would have a section of the spreadsheet that shows how many at bats they have this season, something like that, so that you can easily disregard those types of players. But I'm just going to go back to qualified because I think that's a really good way to do this. And then I'm going to do my little URL trick again, and I'm going to change it to 1000, and that's the URL that I'm going to use here. All right, so I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go back into Excel, and I'm going to do the same thing I've done before and just get data from the web and use my Fangraphs URL, paste that in, and click OK. So now I'm going to have a new tab that is going to give me all of the hitters, and we're going to use that for recent performances. All right, here's what we got. And if you took the scraping stats course, which I highly recommend, you'll know what this stuff means here. But we're going to go down to table 1 because table 1 is the data that we want here. Okay, this is plate appearances, all that good stuff. I am going to transform this for a second because I'm going to get rid of some of the junk that I don't need. Specifically, this first column, I'm going to remove that column, give us some much more clean data, and looks pretty good from here. Okay, so now I've got all the key stats for DraftKings scoring for all 186 players that are currently qualified. And I am going to call this recent form hitters, because I will also have a recent form pitchers column here or table here. And we will close and load this. It will load into another sheet. So you'll see all of our queries are going to continue to add up over here. And again, I'll change the tab name, recent form hitters, just so everything is uniform. Now, before I move on here, I want to calculate DraftKings scoring. So this is just going to load every day and give me, how many points they have scored, but I kind of want averages, right? And I want to put DraftKings scoring in here. So again, I'm going to center all this, and I'm just going to add a new column. What you don't want to do is you don't want to, in theory, I guess there's a couple of ways that we can do this, but I don't want you to put a column in the middle of this. I prefer you do it on the outer edge of it. And actually, as I think about this, we're not going to do it this way. We're actually just going to do it with the query here. So I'm going to go back into the queries and connections, and I'm giving you some really good stuff from this course earlier, but I'm going to edit my recent form hitters, and I'm going to put the calculation in here because that way it's just going to load every day. I don't have to kind of worry about the formatting of it. So bear with me here again. I'm going to stop saying it, but this course is really awesome, and I'll show you how to do all kinds of stuff here. But I'm just going to add a new column, and I want it to be a custom column. So this is going to pop up, and it's going to say, okay, here's your custom column, and I want to call it DraftKings. And I'm literally just going to put in the DraftKings scoring model here. So this might be a little boring, but I'm just going to run through it. So obviously in DraftKings scoring, a single is worth 3 points. So I'm going to do every single by 3. And I make sure that those two get multiplied first. And then I'm going to add in doubles. And doubles are worth 5. And again, these need to be in quotes here. Or in parentheses, excuse me. And then we're going to add in triples again. So we'll do triples are worth 8. And we are going to do home runs, which are worth 10. RBIs are worth 2. So we'll do RBIs times 2. Runs we'll do next, which are going to be also times 2. Add that up. What else am I missing here? Walks, I assume. Yeah, walks. Also times 2. Plus hit by pitch. Do I have that? Yes, I do. Also times 2. Everything times 2. And then stolen bases. And do I have stolen? Yeah, okay. Thought I saw it. All right, times 5. All right. So this would be all of the DraftKings points that a player has scored. So if I click OK, you'll see what happens here. 474 is the number of DraftKings points Cody Bellinger has scored to this point in the season. If you add up all of his hits, all of his stats there. That's great to know, but I probably want this on a per game average because I'm going to project per game. I'm not going to project like the whole season. So I'm going to go back into this custom column that I made, and I'm going to put everything in parentheses again, because I want to do that calculation first. And then I'm going to divide that entire thing by games. And when I click this, it's going to give me the average. So there you go. He's averaging 14.3 DraftKings points per game. Okay, cool. So we've got that now. I am going to change this to a decimal number. Okay, cool. All right. So we've got this. And now I'm ready to close and load this. And you'll see this tab will change here as it loads in, because now it's going to do the calculation for us every time. And I have DraftKings scoring over here on the right-hand side. And I'll just, I was going to remove some of those decimal points, but that's okay. We'll do it later. All right. So now I've got DraftKings, points per game. Okay. So I've got salaries. I've got recent form. We're also going to need the matchup that they're in. So we're going to need the probable pitchers. So let's go there next. For this, I'm going to go right back to Fangraphs and do, I believe they have it under scores, probable pitchers. Now, I will tell you, when I made this video 4 years ago, when I originally did Major League Baseball projections videos, I believe I used this same URL. It went away for some time. I think there was a season or two they did not offer this, or at least they hid it on the website and you had to kind of find it. It's back now, and I believe it is much more accurate. Do not quote me on this, but just in the way that I've seen it this year, this appears to be a much more accurate edition of the probables than we have seen in years past. There were and this is with the caveat that there's always going to be some updates, guys. So whoever, the night before, whoever the probables are, there are going to be times where that guy gets scratched or they have a call up from the minors and they plug him in instead. Like, this is not 100% foolproof. If you want it to be, I guess go find another source for this. I think this is a really, really good one that is going to be as accurate as possible, but understand that it might not be perfect every single day of the season. Okay, that's the disclaimer here. All right, so this is the probables for today. And what you'll notice again is this URL becomes very important. At the end of the URL, it will default to the day that you click it. So it's that's May 4th, 2019, which is when I'm recording this video. So if I went back, I assume if I go back to May 3rd, this is going to be everyone who pitched yesterday, and it is. So I'll go back to today. And there's also something else here that's going to be very, very important. And you'll see it's because some of these guys don't have teams. And that is because they are on different teams than they were last year. So if you look at the rest of this URL, it's showing you 2018 stats. So what you actually want to do is you want to change this to single season is 2019. And you also want, I believe there is, let me see here. Okay, you also want active roster. You only want guys that are on active rosters. And there's one little flaw with this system that Fangraphs uses. For whatever reason, especially when a position player pitches, this gets a little wonky. So here's Kendrys Morales. He has pitched 1 inning this year. The problem is now, because he has pitching stats, Fangraph, I guess, recognizes him as a pitcher in some situations. So you'll see there's 36 probable pitchers for today, according to Fangraphs, which is not accurate because there's only 15 or I think there might be 16 games today because I think there might be a doubleheader. So we're probably only looking for 32 guys, where this is going to be difficult. So what I would recommend also doing is putting in a minimum innings pitched, like 10. Now that's also I don't know if you noticed it, also ruled out Gio Gonzalez, who had only 5 innings pitched, but we're far enough in the season that we should be able to, weed out a couple of these guys. You might not get guys after their first start, for example. So if you wanted to lower it from 10 back to maybe 5 innings pitch, like right here, you can change it in the URL, change it back to 5. You get guys after their first start, basically. Now we're at 31 because there's 2 guys. So Gio was here, and then who else was there? Hold on. They really want my money. I should probably give it to them, considering how much we're using them here. So who were the 2? Okay, so here we go. Rich Hill, and Rich Hill's making his second start. So that's what's happening here. So you'll have to decide what the right amount of innings pitched for you. So once you have that all situated, and actually, you know what? I should have done this on the standard tab. Again, I want to convert all this to DraftKings scoring, obviously. So let's see. 2019 active roster, qualified pitchers. I'll just change it to 10 innings. I think that's fair. And then I will again make this, I need it more than 30. Obviously there's never going to be more than 50 starting pitchers on a single day, but, sometimes there might be 32 depending on if there's a doubleheader. So I'm just going to use 50 just to be safe. I don't want to cut out 1 or 2 guys, and we're going to go right back into Excel, and we are going to do another Power Query from the web to pull in the pitchers for today, the probable pitchers for today. So here's what we get. Very similar to the hitters. We're just going to go down to table 1 and we're going to transform this data. We're going to remove the first column because it's unnecessary. We don't need it. And we are going to plug in now the pitching scoring here for DraftKings. So we're just going to do add column, custom column, and again, we're going to call it DraftKings. Keep everything uniform. And we'll go through this. So innings pitched is going to be worth 2.25. Strikeouts are worth 2. Do I have wins? I do have wins. Okay. A win is worth 4, and you can choose to kind of leave any of these out. I mean, wins, I guess it would give you their average, but I mean, it's not necessarily very predictive. And the rest are negative. So we're going to do negative earned runs. So every earned run is a minus 2. We'll also subtract hits allowed. So hits is 0.6. Then we'll also subtract walks. We're actually going to have to do intentional walks as well. So we'll do walks is times 0.6. And we're going to have to do the same thing here. So intentional walks is 0.6. And then hit by pitch, you guessed it, 0.6. Now they also have complete game and complete game shutout, which I guess I can do that here. So we'll do complete game is worth 2.5. A complete game shutout, I just want to make sure I have the right one. It's right here. Shutout is worth 2.5. And they also have a no-hitter for DraftKings. So in DraftKings, a no-hitter is worth 5. I don't have a stat line that says no-hitter. In the past, I have created something that was like, oh, if they pitched 9 innings and the game only went 9 innings and they gave up 0 hits, like give them 5 points. Quite honestly, it does not happen nearly enough over the course of the entire season for it to come into play on any type of projections, for it to come into play really anywhere, right? I mean, it's just not even a drop in the bucket. It's not even in the bucket. So I would not be too concerned about, omitting the no-hitter portion of this. We'll put it all in parentheses, and we will again divide it by games, and this should give us the average DraftKings points for each one of these pitchers, and it looks like it has done that. We're going to change it to decimal number, and we are going to call it probables. And we're going to close this up and load it, And we're going to change the name of the sheet also to probables. And I'm going to get rid of sheet 1 here. That was unnecessary, just so we have it. All right, so I've got my salaries, I've got my recent form for hitters, I've got my probables, and now I just need, for the first part of this, ballpark. Okay, so how do we factor in the ballpark? And the way that we're going to do that is via ballpark factors. So quite honestly, I think the easiest way to do this is just go to ESPN and grab these. They look like this. There is a lot of sites that have these. I've done it in the past where I've actually done it on a DraftKings basis, in which that's something we also might do here, where we'll calculate the DraftKings scoring of all of these. Really, we just need it to be consistent so that we have a baseline. I know that ESPN is very easy to scrape. That's what we're going to use here. They do also compare home versus away, which not all of the park factors do. So I think just for our purposes, this is a really good way to say, wow, 1.4 runs are scored at Coors Field per the league average, for example, or, half of that at Wrigley. So it is pretty interesting. So I'm just going to grab this URL again, take it back into our friend Power Query and load this up. Now, what we do need to do here is we do need to create a baseline. So I don't want to just use runs, for example. I don't want to just use home runs, for example. Like, we are going to convert these into DraftKings scoring. I understand that it's not counting every DraftKings scoring category, right? Pretty close though, actually. Runs, homer, that doesn't count RBIs, but I guess that's kind of worked in. So it's going to get us close enough. But the point being, we're going to calculate all of the parks on a level playing field, so we'll have a good factor to look at here. So I'm going to remove the first row, or remove the top row, because it's garbage. And then I'm going to use the first row as headers, and you'll see that plops everything up there. Cool. All right. So now, same thing we've just done. We're going to put this all on an even playing field, and we are just going to create a custom column, and we are going to do park factors by DraftKings. So here we go. So DraftKings scoring. So this is going to give us basically the average number of DraftKings points per ballpark, for example, but it's kind of like a weighted DraftKings score. You'll see what I mean when I go through this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do runs are runs times 2 plus home runs. I'll go in their order, not the one I would normally go in, but I'll go in their order so I don't miss any. Home runs are 10. Then they go to hits, which are 3. We'll count it. Yeah, well, it's hits. That's singles. I'm not sure if they count it as singles, but for our purposes, again, as long as we're weighing everything on the same baseline, it's going to be close enough. There'll be a negligible difference here. 5 plus triples are 8. Making sure that I have my format correct here. And then the last one would be walks are 2, which I mean, walks really shouldn't matter by ballpark, should they? So here's what we'll do. So I'll calculate this, and you'll see what I'm getting at here. So this is generally now like a score, for example, right? Because so I'm trying to think how I want to put this. If you use ESPN's ballpark factors and say, okay, a home run at Angel Stadium is 2 times as likely as the league average, which is basically what this is getting at. Well, it being 2 times, a home run is not 2 times more points than a single. It's actually 3 and then some, because a single is only 3 and a home run's only 10, and a home run is 10. So we're essentially weighing the likelihood and the probability of each stat, converting it into DraftKings points, and almost giving it like a weighted DraftKings average. So this is a little noisy here I would argue, triples are super noisy. We might even want to get rid of triples, because if you look at this, if triples are 8 times as likely at Rogers Center, that boosts up their park factor, their DraftKings park factor by a ton. And this might be a very, very, very small sample size. Like, I don't know how many triples there have been in the league this year, a month in, but it's probably not enough to call this. Like, actually, while I'm here, let's just go back and look at last year and see what like the biggest triple discrepancy was. Yeah, nobody was over like 2.1. Let me just go back to 2019. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this for me. You decide. And again, when this gets later in the season, it's probably not going to matter. I'm gonna omit triples at this point, because what it's going to do is it's really going to blow up what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm just going to go back into my custom model, and I'm going to get rid of triples until maybe later in the season when there's more of them. And now you'll see this is more in line with what we would expect. I don't want, because one stadium has allowed 5 triples and another one has allowed 1, to blow up our entire projection system, because it's literally only a difference of 4 triples over how many thousand at bats. Like, it's not worth it. So this is much more in line with what we would expect, where, and actually you'll see, based on ESPN's ballpark factors, Great American Ballpark is the 4th most hitter-friendly ballpark, but that is for runs. I would call it the 2nd most hitter-friendly ballpark in terms of DraftKings scoring. So that's kind of what we're going for. Again, change this to a decimal number, change the table name to, we'll call it Park Factors, load it up, save the tab, and now we have everything saved. We have the items that we're going to be calculating saved in here. So we're off to a really good start. All right, so now we're ready to start building out our hitters tab. And just for the sake of simplicity and keeping everything separate, I wouldn't recommend kind of gunking up your salaries tab here. I wouldn't recommend actually really ever touching any of these and putting formulas in them, just for, again, the sake of simplicity. So I'm going to create a new tab and call it hitters. And then I'm just going to start putting in some of the statistics that, or some of the columns that I might be looking for here. So like player, position, team, opponent. Let's see what else we can do. Projection for today. We'll get to some other ones, but let's start with this as kind of a starting point. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this. We need to get players, specifically hitters, over from the salaries tab. In the past, I've said you could just copy and paste these, which you can. In the past, I would say you could just do a little function and just go grab those players, which I still think is probably the best way to do it, but we're going to have to remove pitchers, unfortunately. So either way, we're still going to have to filter out pitchers. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is simply just do equals, come to the salaries tab, and do, click on Max Scherzer's name. So it's going to pull from that column. If I drag down, it's going to pull everyone else. So I'm just going to drag this all the way down. You can see I was already testing some of this until I run out of players, which I think is, I don't know how many players are in this sheet right here. Let's see. 226, so almost there. All right, 226. And actually, you can go a little bit further, because days that there's more players in the player pool, this will just keep going. So these are now all of our players. I was thinking maybe just writing a little if statement that removes pitchers, but it would also be blank, right? So like if I don't bring over Max Scherzer, there's just gonna be a blank row there, which you're gonna have to get rid of anyway. So we'll just continue along our path here. And if you have done the projection models in the past, you know that I am the king of the VLOOKUP. So I'm just going to create a VLOOKUP for Max Scherzer. I'm going to tell it to go back to the salary sheet, look for Max Scherzer, and when you find him, return me the pitcher here. So I'm actually going to take everything. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns worth. And when it finds Max Scherzer, return the third column. So it counts itself 1, 2, 3, and then do false. And we'll see what comes back here. Pitcher. Okay, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this from C2. I'm just going to open up the range. So now anything in C to I, which is anything on that salaries tab in column C through I, show me column 3. Now, but I've done this correctly. So now I can kind of do this a few different ways here. And actually, I'll put salary in here too. That's one that I missed. And I'll put it over here, like average, in case you want to see that. So because I've done this correctly, I can actually load this into all of these. I'm just going to copy and paste and now go through. So for average points, I know that that is column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'll go back to my hitters tab, change the 3 to a 7, and that's going to be his average. Team and opponent. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is his team. We'll have to get opponent later. I'll show you how to do that. So 6 is team. Opponent will get. Salary is going to be 4. So salary will be 4. And projection will come back to, and opponent will come back to. But what I'll do now is I'll just drag this down, right? So it's going to VLOOKUP everybody, and I can double click this. So it's going to pull over every player's salary, their team, their average DraftKings points, their position, right? It's pretty slick. So we've got that going all the way down. All right, so for opponent, we're going to have to do a little bit of manipulation here, which should be pretty cool. So let's go back to the salaries here. And I have, both teams here, right? I know Max Scherzer plays for Washington, and the opponent that he has today is Philadelphia. But I need to split them up. I have to find a way. So in previous versions in Google Sheets, I have delimited or split based on that @ sign. We're going to do something similar here. So I'm just going to pull up that query for our salaries, and we're going to edit this. And let me see if I can do this properly, where I am going to right click and split this column based on a delimiter. And that delimiter is going to be a custom delimiter, and it is actually the @ sign, and we're going to do it for the leftmost time, the first time it finds it. Okay, so now I've got my one team split out, and I still have, my second team with the rest of this game information. So I'm going to split again, and I'm just going to split by a space this time, the first time it finds a space. So now I have both teams separated here. So now what I can do is add a new column, but this time I'm going to do a conditional column, and you'll see why. And I'm going to call this opponent. And I'm going to say if the team abbreviation is equal to, this is my first team, then present me the second team. Otherwise, show me the first team. And you'll see what I'm getting at here. So here's what it says. Here's Max Scherzer's team. It compares it against the away team in our situation. So if Washington, if the team matches the away team, show me the home team, because that must be the opponent. But if that doesn't match, then show me the away team, because that must be the opponent. It's basically saying pull me whichever one is not the player's team, and you'll see that's what it did here. So Scherzer is Philadelphia, LA, Baltimore, Philly, all good. This worked. Now I might have screwed up some of our other things here. Let's go back and check. Yeah, I did. So because I added in more columns, I screwed this up a little bit. But now what I'll do is I'll just adjust these. So now it's C to M. So let's see. Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll do C to M. So average is going to be, actually, I'm gonna wait on average because I'm gonna show you probably a better way to do this. Let's grab opponent. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I should be able to change this to a 10 and get their opponents. There they are. Cool. So I've got salary, team, average, opponent. Good stuff. Position. So then if opponent was 10, oh, this is now wrong. So team is no longer 6. It is going to be, so if this is 10, this is 9, this is 8. So we'll just change this to 8. Sorry, just an extra minute of work here, my bad. And then I know that the average then actually split the difference there. That was 9. So I'll put that back in. And now I've got some pretty interesting stuff going on here. Now, I want to be clear that average is coming from DraftKings, which I guess for their purposes is just the 2019 season. So I'm going to put 2019 in here. And this is where you need to decide what time frame you want to project off of. And actually, I should be smart about this, and I'll filter pitchers out. So everybody but pitchers. Okay. So now, whoops, sorry. Everybody but pitchers. There we go. So now you have to decide, what do I want to use as my first baseline for projections? Do I want to use Mike Trout's entire season? Well, the longer that we go on, all of these averages are going to normalize a bit more. I would recommend trying to use a smaller time frame for hitters. You might want to look at how hot a hitter is right now, but you have to decide what that means. Is that 7 days? Is it 14? Is it 30? Like, the longer the time frame, the more stable your projections are going to be. The shorter, the more volatile they're going to be. And I guess it depends on your style. If you're playing cash games, you might want to just go with a longer window. If you're going with GPPs, you might want to open up, or you might want to close the window a little bit and just say, give me the hottest guys in the last 7 days. Now, you're going to get some pretty high projections, because if someone has a really good week and it goes to a really good ballpark and has a really good matchup with a pitcher, it's going to project them for a huge number. So you have to really decide what this looks like for you. But I'll show you what I'll do here. I'm going to bring in a different time frame than just 2019. And the way that I'm going to do that is I am just going to go back into Fangraphs and adjust the filters a little bit. Here's that page we used, and I'm just going to change it from full season to the last 14 days. And you'll see there's going to be a lot more volatility in these. Guys are going to be batting over 400 regularly. But this is what we're going to use, because I think that's a better, it's 30, 40, 50 at-bats for some of these guys, which I think is a good sample size. It's not so small, but it's also not massive either. So again, I will just open this up to 50. And I'll adjust my URL at the top here to 1,000, and I'll take this. So I'm going to create a second query here. Or actually, I don't need to. I can just change my recent form, because that's really all I need this for. Recent form should not have been 2019. It should have been a smaller subset. So I'm just going to open this query back up. And the good part about Power Query is I shouldn't have to change anything. I'm just going to, as long as the structure is identical, I can just change the URL. So I'm just going to paste in a new URL, and it's still going to apply all of the same steps, assuming that the structure of the data and what we're pulling is exactly the same, which it should be, because it's Fangraphs, and it looks like it is. Yeah. So now I've got, 8 games instead of 30 games for some of these top guys on my list here. So that makes a lot more sense. So when I close and load this, it's now going to pull in the last 14 days, and I will go back to my hitters tab, and I'm going to create a column for L14, which is the last 14 days. And now it's VLOOKUP time. So VLOOKUP for Mike Trout in the recent form hitters tab, and when you find Mike Trout, grab 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops, I counted that wrong. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. 13 was N. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. You guys are watching a video where I count to 23. Okay, change this to B and X and press this. Boom. All right. Mike Trout is averaging 10 DraftKings points per game in his last 14. Is that right? Let's see if that is right. Can I find Mike Trout in here? There he is, 76th. And yeah, 10. Perfect. Okay, cool. So if I drag this down, I should be able to see. Sweet. We'll see what's going on with Christian Yelich there in a second. We'll do some of these guys, but awesome. All right, and I am actually just going to get rid of this filter. I think it's a little easier to use without it. I'm going to opt to just sort these guys by position, and then I'm just going to delete the pitchers. To me, that's a little bit cleaner for this data to work with. I hate working with filters on there. So bear with me for 1 second. And actually, as I'm going through this, I think what I'm actually going to want to do is, I know I know I told you could have just, done equal salary is for name. I'm going to tell you to do the same thing I told you a couple years ago, which I still think is the best. Just copy and paste these in. So I'm just going to copy everybody, and I'm going to right click. And when you paste them in, paste values only. The reason I'm doing this is when you start running everything off of each other, you get this circular loop, right? Where this cell is looking at another sheet, and then these cells are all looking at this other thing that's looking at another sheet. Like it makes your sorting and everything a little wonky. So there we go. Now it's better. So I still recommend copy and paste values only. If I find a better way to do that where we can still manipulate the data, I'll let you know. And then now I can just go down to the pictures and delete these. I have a couple other ways in mind, but all of them are still going to include like getting rid of the pictures or getting rid of something that says pictures instead of P. Like none of them are really ideal, but this is going to work. So that's all I really care about. And then I'm going to go back up to the top here, and I'm going to drag this last 14, all the way down to the bottom. I should now have, there we go. And actually, there were a few more pictures down here. All right, so we've got that all cleaned up, but now you can tell we're already running into a few issues here. So I think the most obvious one was Christian Yelich. So let me see if I can sort this by 2019, largest to smallest. And Yelich pops up here. But he doesn't show up in our last 14 column. So if we go back to Fangraphs and see, you'll notice Yelich isn't on here. And it's because he doesn't qualify. He doesn't have enough at-bats to qualify. He's missed a couple of games. So with this, you're going to run into those situations. You might want to change this to 10 minimum plate appearances. Again, it opens up the volatility, but you're going to get more guys who, hey, they missed a couple of games. They, like he's probably barely missing the number of at-bats he needs to qualify here. He's played 8 games. A lot of these other guys have only played 9 or 10, but he's at-bats short. So I'll just go back into Power Query and go back into my recent form. And this is what I love about this is we can just make these little adjustments on the fly. And we're going to change our qualification to 10 instead of a yes for qualified. So that's 10 at bats. And this should give us more players. Close and load. So it's going to load that data in. And then if we go back to the hitters tab, we should start getting, there's Christian Yelich. So some of these guys still aren't going to have 10 at-bats. That's fine. We'll deal with how we want to clean that up later. But now a lot more guys are qualified and are going to be eligible for projection. So I think that was a really good switch up. All right, so now I'm going to start cleaning this up a little bit. I actually am going to start changing some of these tab colors so I know what I can touch and what I don't want to touch. Anything that's pulling in from an outside source, I'm going to put a red. Oops, I guess I should. Oh, I guess they're the same. Okay. I'm going to put red on, which is basically like, don't touch these. These are being pulled in from somewhere. So anything with red, that's what you see here. Hitters is, green is going to be my work because we're going to have to start creating some functions. If you remember that, we're going to create a functions tab here, and we're going to get more in depth on this at some point later, but let me just show you what I'm talking about. And I'm going to change this to just be, let's just do like a grayish or black there because you are going to make updates to this. All right, so here's the problem. What I want to do is I want to pull in the pitcher who is going to be pitching against our batters today. Well, if that's the case, I need to find out who the probable pitcher is and then find out who the opponent is, right? The problem here is I can see, let's find somebody who's actually playing. Cody Bellinger is facing San Diego today. I have the opponent as SD. But when I go to my probables tab, that's listed out as Padres. It's not listed out as SD. So we are going to create and start creating this running list of functions, essentially, that are going to allow us to combine sources from different websites where, if Baseball Reference has team names one way, Fangraphs has them as another. There's different spellings across the board of players' names, things like that. So I'm going to show you a basic example here. Later, we are going to get into like the way more complex version of this, but let me just run through this so I can get our opposing pitchers in here. So really what I want to do is I probably want to start with, let's just do the opponents here. And I'm going to copy all of these and I'm going to put them on the functions tab and I'm going to paste them as values. And then I am going to remove my dupes here, which I believe is this one. Yeah. So remove duplicates. And then I'm going to actually, oh, this isn't going to work. Hold on. Why did I only get 20 of them? Let's see here. It's because this is not a full slate. So I'm actually going to do it like this. I'm going to go to the probables. I'm going to grab all of the teams and I am going to paste them in here. And I'm still one short. It would have been, let's see here. Let's sort these. Wow, this is getting really ugly here. Hold on one second. So we'll go back, sort these by alphabetical, clean them up a little bit. Okay, so I'm missing one team that I didn't have on my probables, which should have been, it might be the White Sox. Hold on, let me find it. Oh, it's Gio Gonzalez's team. It's the Brewers. So because he wasn't a qualified pitcher here, but now this should be everybody. All right, so we're gonna have team, and then I'm gonna put in F, or this is actually DK abbreviation. So I know I can just run through some of these, but I know the Angels are LAA, Houston. Some of these I might get wrong because they're not all uniform, but we should be good here. Like, I don't know if Arizona is ARI or ARZ. We'll come back and figure that out at some point. Miami, NYM, Washington. I believe they only use two letters for San Diego, and actually, I think it's also just FG for the Giants. Again, we'll fix it if it's wrong later. Tampa Bay is probably the same. Oh no, I got two Rays in here. Delete that. So now I'm still a team short, and it's the Dodgers. So I'll put the Dodgers in here. LAD. Back down here, Boston, Cincy, Colorado, KC, I think it is, Detroit, Minnesota. I don't know what the White Sox are, maybe that. And NYY. All right, so now what we can do is basically tell this spreadsheet go out and find me the pitcher for the opponent of this abbreviation, but convert it to the team name first, and then go find that pitcher. So I'll show you what that formula looks like. Now, before we do that, I want to do one little tweak to the probables here. So there's, again, probably a better way to do this with index matches and whatnot, but I love VLOOKUP, so I need to get the pitcher's name on the right side of the team, since I'm going to trigger off the team name. So again, what's kind of cool about this is I'm just going to continue to update my query. Like, it's going to do this for me every single time. I'm just making little tweaks to this as I go along here. So what we have is we're just going to add another custom column, and all this custom column is going to be, and I'm actually just going to call it, let's call it opposing pitcher, because that's what I'm going to use it for. And we will call, I'm just literally just going to, it's going to be an exact replica of the name. It's just, now we're going to have name in 2 different places. That's it. Like, literally that simple. And I'm going to close and load this. And then I also want to remember, so if I'm going to trigger off team, I want to count how many columns until we get to the pitcher's name. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Again, you guys get the honor of listening to me count. Very exciting. All right. So now if we go back to the hitters tab, this is going to be a nested VLOOKUP. It is going to be a VLOOKUP inside a VLOOKUP, which is very, very handy in situations when we need to pass through a different value. So I'll do this step by step. So I'm going to do a VLOOKUP, a standard VLOOKUP, off of the opponent's abbreviation, which is important. So I'm going to look for the opponent's abbreviation in my functions tab, and when it finds my abbreviation, return the second column, which is my team name, to this cell. So I'm just going to start, I'm going to press enter and start there. Perfect. Instead of Cincinnati, it returned Reds. Now I'm going to tell Excel to use Reds in another VLOOKUP to go get the probable pitcher. And if we do this correctly, we should get the name. So I'm going to go and put a VLOOKUP at the beginning of this. Our lookup value is now this function, which we know that the function is Reds. That's now the lookup value it's going to look for. So I'm just going to put a comma. That's, or a comma. There we go. That's the input. Now I'm going to tell it, go look at function, I'm sorry, it is probables, and it is, let's see here, we want C to AA, so it'll be C to AA, I'll get my cursor out of the way for you, 25, which is when you find the team in C, return 25 columns later, which should be AA, which should be our opposing pitcher, false, and press enter, and hopefully this returns. Oh, there we go. It put in it closed off my parentheses for me, right? So it is going to do this VLOOKUP first to get the valid input, and then it's going to nest it in there. So it worked. Tanner Roark. So if we go back to the probables and we go to the Reds, which of course they're right here, Tanner Roark is our pitcher for today, which is absolutely true. He is. So boom, we've got it. All right. We have got opposing pitcher. So now we can drag this down. You'll see it'll start to fill in all the different opposing pitchers for today. You can see that some of them are giving us errors. So what does that mean? We're triggering off of opponent. So like my CWS, that might be wrong. So let me go back in here. Yeah, I use CHW, so change that to CWS in your functions tab. So that should fix that one, and it did. LAD, did I have that incorrectly? Or, oh, we might not have had a probable for some. Okay, you're right. The Brewers was Gio Gonzalez, which did not show up in our qualified probables. So I kept mine at a innings pitched minimum. If you did not, he would have showed up. And same thing for Rich Hill. Those were the two teams. So Milwaukee and LA do not have a pitcher in the probables based on the parameters that I put in. One way to update this is to do an if error and basically change the NA to something different. Like we'll do like default or average or something. So let me see if I can do this here. I'll basically just do an if error at the start of this. So if I get an error on all of this, show, we're going to call it average, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in the league average pitcher later. So let's see if this worked. Because if I have a small sample size, I don't want to lose. There we go. Now it says average. I don't want to lose projected stats for all of my hitters who are going against their opponents. You don't want them to be penalized because they're going against a guy who doesn't have enough innings to qualify. So you can either open up the innings that are going to qualify, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it average. And actually, that needs to stand out more. I'm going to call it like LA for league average, maybe something like that. All right, we'll leave it. We'll leave it as average. But that way I know, so I'm just going to give it all baseline average stats later. So we're still going to be able to project hitters against pitchers who don't have enough stats to qualify. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, now that we know who the opposing pitcher is, we basically need to determine how good that opposing pitcher is. So I like to call this pitch weight, which is basically, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I do know how to describe it. It's a weighted average of how many DraftKings points this pitcher gives up against the league average. Okay. So if someone is a 2 pitch weight, they give up 2 times as many DraftKings points to the league average. So what we need to do is we need to get the league average, right? So what we're going to do, in the same way that we did this for, hitter stats, we are now going to pull in pitcher stats from Fangraphs so that we can capture the current league average on a daily basis. So same thing, we're going to go to leaders, pitching leaders. And again, you need to decide what is important to you, right? And wait, actually, have we already brought this in? I feel like we've already done this. Oh, I only have it for the probables. Okay, so don't be confused, because what I could do is I could create a pitch weight for just the probables, but what I really need is I need everyone in the league, right? So we'd skew the numbers if only bad pitchers were pitching on a single night, or only good ones, or it's just, you don't want to compare it against the slate necessarily, because the player's recent form is not just against everyone on the slate. So we're going to do this. So again, you need to decide what you want to do here. I'm going to do the last 30 days. I think the last 30 days for pitchers is a pretty good measuring stick. I'll do 10 innings pitched as a minimum. And I will go to the standard report, which is what I need. And you'll see we've got all the standard stats here. 290 pitchers qualify for 10 innings pitched over the course of the last 30 days. So that's pretty fair. We're going to do our normal, grab everybody in the league. So we're going to change our URL out to be 500. That's usually enough for pitchers. So we'll just grab this URL and just want to give this one more glance. Okay. Now, if I remember correctly, and we've done this correctly, we should just be able to take the exact query that we used for the probables and do it for the pitcher stats. So let's open this up, and I'm actually going to right-click and duplicate the probables, because we're going to make the same calculations for DraftKings points. We're going to do that. So really, if I just change my source from the old URL to the new one, which looks like this, Let's see if this works. I believe the structure should be the same. We're still going to make all the same calculations, but I don't have to type in again. Yeah, awesome. So now I don't have to type in DraftKings again because it's already going to calculate it for me. And then I actually don't need this opposing pitchers one. So I'll delete that step just to avoid any confusion because it's not relevant here. And then we're not going to call this probables. We're going to call this pitchers recent form pitchers, just to keep everything uniform with recent form of hitters. And we will load this bad boy up. Cool. There it is. Actually, as I'm looking at this is such a good learning process because as I'm looking at this isn't going to work either because it's going to give me all the relievers here too. And I could do DraftKings points by innings pitched maybe, but that's not really what we want. So I'm actually going to go back to Fangraphs and just change it to starters. Everything else is going to stay the same. And I'm going to take this URL and we're just going to go back into that query and swap it out. So it should just take a second here. Recent form for pitchers is just going to be a new source and it's going to be all of our starters. That way we're not dealing with relievers that are skewing the data. This should be just our starters. Should be a lot less. Yeah, okay, cool. So there's actually now only, could that be right? 30, oh, you know what? We got to do our little trick here. So I'll edit this again. It's only showing us the first 30 results. So we will go to the end of this. And I know that if I change the URL from 30, it's going to, to 50. At the end, it adds this. End page is equal to 1_50. So we're just going to do that. So end page is equal to 1_500. And it's going to give us 500 or up to 500. I guess not necessarily 500 because there's not going to be that many qualified. So now when we load this in, so that's what's cool about this is I can just make these tweaks along the way. It's very, very handy as we're going through it. So now there we go, 156 players. And now I can start figuring out league average and stuff. Okay, so we'll do this a couple ways. So I'm just going to come over here and throw it on the side, league average. So the league average of DraftKings points per game for starters is just going to be Z to Z, 13.66. So what the opposite of this is, and actually as I'm talking through it, this is going to come in handy later. We're not going to use it now. So that is how many points pitchers score. What we need is how many points they allow. So we're going to open this query back up and we are going to do the calculation. We're going to add a new custom column for how many DraftKings points they allow. So we'll say DK points allowed, because that's really what matters when we're doing hitters projections, right? I want to know that they allow more points to opposing hitters. We will use the league average for pitchers later, so we'll save that. So let's just do this again really quickly here. We'll do singles, or I guess it's actually hits allowed. We'll have to break it down a little bit. We'll do hits times 3. And I don't think we'll be able to get doubles here. So we'll do hits. We'll do home runs, I believe we have. Yeah, we'll do home runs times 10. So again, this isn't going to be exactly accurate, but it's going to be pretty negligible along the way. And as long as we are counting every pitcher on the same scoring system, we're going to be in good shape here. The only way this would be a little bit inaccurate, it'd be a very small amount. It'd be if someone gave up like an exorbitant amount of like doubles and triples compared to the rest of the league, which is probably not happening. So again, we'll do hit by pitch, walk. I think I have to do intentional walks here. And is that all I have? Blown saves, hits, runs, earn runs, walks, home runs, ball. Okay. All right. So this will be like our DraftKings points allowed. And then we'll do all of that by number of games. All right. So there we go. So now what this is saying is, and let me load this in. So John Lester allows 10. Oh, yeah. See, these numbers are a little bit higher because he's only allowed one run. Yeah, great ERA. So let's find someone a little better. This is a good example. Glass now. Okay. He scores 26.5 DraftKings points, but allows 19.3 per game. And a lot of these go up from there, right? I mean, imagine, this is, if you're a worse pitcher, you're going to give up 30, 40, 50 DraftKings points per game, which is kind of what we're looking at here. Okay. So now what I'll do is league average of allowed, and we're just going to do the same thing. So it's average AA to AA, and now it's 33. That number looks much better. So now what we can do is a few things. We can compare the pitchers for tonight against how they do against the rest of the league. So let's do this. So what I will do is I will grab, and actually, hold on, we're going to have to do this in the probables too. I'll speed up so you don't have to watch me do this, but what I'm going to have to do in the probables is also a DK points allowed. So I'm just going to pause real quick so you don't have to sit here and watch it, and you'll see it. All right, so now it's in there. What we're going to do is we're going to do a VLOOKUP for Tanner Roark's average DraftKings points allowed in the last 30 days. So we'll do B to AA. No, I'm sorry. I want to do probables. B to AB. And when you find that, it's probably like 27. Let me just guess, and then I'll back into it. So 30.88. Is that right? Where's Roark? Right here. 30.88. Yes. So good guess by me. So now that I have that, what I will do is I want to divide this by the league average. So we'll divide that by our recent form for pitchers, which is going to be right here. And I want to lock this down because I don't want that, as I drag this, I don't want that cell to ever change. It's going to always pull from AE2. And as this refreshes every day and the league average updates every day, that number is going to change and it's going to re-weight itself essentially. Okay, so I can remove some decimals here. But what this is essentially saying is Tanner Roark allows 91.4% of the league average of DraftKings points. So he is actually better than league average when it comes to allowing DraftKings points. So that hurts the hitters that he is facing by just a little bit. So we'll drag this down and we'll see what other ones we have here. Jake Arrieta, that is about 5% more than the league average. This one right here, this must be a small sample size, such a small number. You're usually going to see these between like 750 and 1.5, something like that. As we kind of drag this down, you'll see some other options here. There you go. So I'll click it all the way down. Oh, cool. And then what we'll do is, so you'll see, okay, so that's how we're going to weigh some of these. And then we're going to do another if error, and we're going to say if error of all this show 1.0, which should allow me to do this. Let's see. Perfect. Perfect. So now what I've got is, let's make it, there we go. 1.0 is the league average. So now I can just say, okay, if I don't have a big enough sample size for my probables or anything like that, it's going to be a 1.0. It's just a baseline. It's just, they're just one. They're league average. We're so close to being able to project a few things here. We actually have 2/3 of the factors that we're going to use to calculate projections already in the sheet. We have recent form in the shape of the last 14 days. We have the pitching weight. So that's the form of, or we have the pitcher that they're going to face in the form of pitch weight. So now we just need the ballpark. So what I'm going to do is I'll put ballpark, I'll do park and park weight. So this one should be fairly straightforward. By default, we've kind of already separated out who the home team is. Whether it was the best way to do it or not, we've already done it. So that's back on the salary sheet. So if we go back to that salary sheet and scroll all the way up, please. When I split, remember this used to be, it used to say Washington at Philadelphia, and then it had this other game information here. Well, what that has essentially done is now I know that in G, these are all the away teams. And in H, those are all the home teams. As simple as that, right? So what we're going to do is go back to our hitters tab, and we're just going to do a VLOOKUP for all of these players. And we are going to grab the home team. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So C to H, 6. And that's your home team. Beautiful. So now, if we go to look at our park factors, all we'll need to do is find, Cincinnati, and then grab, again, kind of the same league average weight for what we've done here. So we're going to do a few things. I'm going to put team abbreviations here. So this is just going to be team abbrev, because we're really only going to have to do this once. Oh, you know what? Actually, no, let me think about this for a second. I can't put it there. This might be a little backwards way to do this, but I'm just going to copy all the park names, and I'm going to paste values over here. And then I'm going to put the team abbreviations here. I don't even know how to spell abbreviations anymore. My mind is fried. All right, so then we're just going to go through these really quick again. So Colorado, Baltimore, LAA, Sin, Cleveland, KC, Milwaukee, Houston, Miami. Again, this is exciting stuff, isn't it? But you're going to have to do it too, so we might as well do it. Guaranteed rate field. I screwed this up last time. I think it's CWS for the White Sox. Pitt, Texas, St. Louis, Detroit, Toronto, Boston, SF, NYM, Seattle, ATL, Washington, TB, ARI, I believe, SD, NYY, Oak, Min, Chicago. All right, so I've got team abbreviations there. Then what I can do is a VLOOKUP, because the part factors on the left are going to update and move. So I can't just say this column is always going to be Denver, because that's not true. Or Colorado, that's not true. So I'm just going to do a VLOOKUP and say, okay, if you find this, bring over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So now I have the abbreviation next to, okay, and that's gonna change, right? So this right here, so this DK will change. And then we'll do the league average like we did last time. So this is league average is going to be average of MM So 23.2. Okay. So we could actually calculate this here. I guess there's no real reason not to, right? So this would just be our park factor. And we'll just do this equals whatever the DraftKings scoring is divided by the league average. And we'll just do it to a couple decimal points. And make sure that you lock down P1 so that when you drive the formula down, it stays there. All right, interesting, cool. So now what this says is Coors Field allows 13.6 more DraftKings points than the league average. Citizens Bank Park allows 95% of it. Target Field, 87.9% of the league average. So now what we can do is we'll just go back to the hitters tab, and we're just going to pull the park weight in with another simple VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP for Cincinnati in our park factors tab, which is going to be L to N. When you find it, return 3. And we're good. And we'll just move our decimal points around here and drop these in. Because really, let's think about this. This will never change, but it'll always, and this will never change. The name and the abbreviations will never change. But these will, no matter what order they're in, it doesn't matter, because it'll always just VLOOKUP off of this table that's going to change. And then it's going to calculate the park factor off of the league average, which will always change. Okay, so that's good. So we have static data in the fields we need data in, and dynamic data in the fields we need dynamic data in. So we have got our park weights in there, and we are just about ready to start calculating some projections. Now it's time for projections, and there is a few ways that we can do this. And actually, I already have a projections column. I guess I could just clear that out and use that. So the 3 factors that we want to use are, actually, I'll do Bellinger right here. They are the pitcher's weight, the park weight, and the last 14 days. We have to figure out how to combine them into a projection. I personally like to average the park weight and the pitch weight and then multiply it by the last 14 days. To me, it makes the projections a little tighter. It protects against situations like this, where the pitch weight is so low because this is such a small sample size. I don't want it to really throw everything out of whack here. It is going to impact it one way or another, but instead of taking like 30% of what the player's last 14 days would be, if you average the park weight together, it kind of evens itself out. So I think this really gives this a much more consistent vibe to it, but you can kind of do this any way you want. So what I'll do is I'm just going to average the pitch weight with the park weight. So you'll see it's 0.97. So when you average those together, it's basically saying Cody Bellinger is projected to score 97.7% of his last 14 days. So if I then take that and multiply it by his actual last 14 days, D5, I get his projection for today. And I'll just drag this down a little bit here. You can see that really small sample size really impacts Joey Gallo. 9.83, 8.4, some of these. You'll see, 1 or 2 points is a big difference off of someone's 14 days. Here you go. Here's a really good one. So you have a positive pitcher, you have a positive park. So this is a pretty significant projection for Marte, who, is averaging only 10 points this season. He's projected for 13.3 tonight. And I know what you're saying, like, well, that doesn't really sound like a lot, but like, think about it. It is. It is 30% of what his season average is projected. It's kind of same thing here. Like, these guys are well above their season average because they're playing better. They're in a plus pitching matchup, and they're in a plus, hitter's park. Like, this is a big deal in baseball, 1 or 2 points, because the sport's so volatile that 1 or 2 points over the projection indicates a really, really good matchup or position to be in. So, I mean, this is something we can just continue to do here and drag down, and you'll see all the projections. So now we've got projections in here. What we'll do is we'll go through, we'll clean this up, we'll add a few more things along the way, but and then we'll have to do the pitcher still, but that'll be a lot easier now that we have the rest of this in place. All right, so I've just done a few things to clean up here. I've obviously prettied it up a bit. I just changed the color of my header. I added conditional formatting for 2019, for L14, for salary projections, projected value, pitch weight, and park weight. I added projected value. So this would be, value if you divide player's salary by 1,000 and then do their projected points. It's how much value they're projected to score. So Joey Gallo projected to score 1.4 times his salary. So a very basic example of this: if a $5,000 player scores 15 DraftKings points, that is 3 times value, because 5,000 divided by 1,000 is 5. 15 divided by 3 is, 15 divided by 5 is 3. So it would be 3 times value. That way you can measure different players against each other in different price ranges. So I've done that. What I've also done is I've added a few if-error statements to clean up all these incorrect formulas here. So because there are players who do not have enough at-bats to qualify for our last 14-day column here, I added an if error around the whole thing that says if error, and then this was our original formula. Just put NQ in there, which means, not qualified for me. You can put anything you want in there. I don't care. But I just put NQ, like not enough at bats to qualify. The additional other thing we're going to do here is we're going to change the projections. So this is the original projection calculation that I have in here, where it averages pitch weight, park weight, and then multiplies by last 14. Well, what I said is if error, this is what you would normally do. If error, actually average pitch weight and park weight like normal, and then multiply against 2019. So this should give us a projection for everyone, or for most people. The only way you would not, and I guess you wouldn't even be on this if you haven't played in 2019. So that's a really good way to do this. Okay, I see what's going on here. But yeah, that cleans up a lot of our data, where basically it says, use last 14 first. If a player doesn't qualify that, default back to their 2019 average and use that for the projection. So it's a pretty cool little trick to make sure we're getting as much data as possible and building in a few different contingencies along the way. So now that I have this mostly, this is basically complete for your hitters. We're going to switch over to pitchers now, and I'm going to use this as the existing template. So I am just going to make a copy of this and call it call it pitchers, because it's a really good workspace to start with. We're going to be able to reuse a lot of this and just kind of swap out the hitters for the pitchers, and then go from there. So what I'll do is this can stay the same. I'm going to change this to opponent instead of opponent pitcher. Obviously, that doesn't matter. And then pitch weight is going to become opponent weight. So we'll calculate that in a second, but just to kind of show you where I'm going here. And then I will actually clear out these two columns just so that I remember they need to be updated. And then I will also clear out all of these players here, because what I really want are, and this is a great sign, by the way, the fact that all of this stuff broke, because it's all triggering off the player's name, which is exactly what we would want it to do. So I'll go back into our pitchers here, and let me try something. Can I can I do this? Can I just grab pitchers? I don't use, let me see if I can, I don't use filters as much as most people do. Let me see if I do this, if I just try to paste from a filter, if this grabs everybody or, okay, cool. It looked like it worked. It looked like it did just grab the pitcher. So you can filter, so that's good to know. So what I could have done, and even for the hitters too, is filter this based off of the positions that you want to pull in, and then copy and paste those into the appropriate sheet for hitters or pitchers. So that's pretty slick. So what I'll do then is I'll just get rid of, or actually, well, we learned that, but it's really unnecessary because the pitchers tonight should really be coming from the probables. We don't need 579 pitchers tonight because there are not that many. So let me just redo this real quick. I actually want to go back to the probables. Here we go. So these are the pitchers that I want for today. So I'll grab these pitchers. There we go. And we'll throw them into the pitchers tab and paste those in. And we should start seeing some information come across. That looks good. Let me just clean this up for a second. I'll just clear these out. So we have kind of a clean workspace to go on here. Okay, cool. So we've got pitchers in here, and already we're seeing some good things. We're seeing some bad things. So we'll go through these and figure out how to clean all this up here. Now, first things first, when I look at this and see why aren't they pulling position, team, opponent, all that stuff, well, that's on our salaries tab. And I know that the salaries that I put in, it was only a 10-game slate. It was not the full slate. So there are going to be guys that don't have salaries or don't have anything because that's not the slate that we told it to. So for that, really all I'm going to do is just remove them. If I would have grabbed the full slate, that would have looked much more like this. So now that I have it, I can say, okay, cool. I've got all my pitchers in here. I've got their 2019. So this is still coming from that salary sheet. This will have to update because we're not going to come from recent form. So actually I will again clear this out so that I know it has to come in, and I will change it to last 30. And let's see here. I've got team, that is going to be correct. I've got opponent, that is correct. I have park, that is going to be correct. Oh, and actually, I guess I don't even need opponent because I already have opponent on here. So I can say I can get rid of that. Park weight, cool. So we're really really far along the way here. So now for our last 30 days, we're going to need to look at, this should be it, recent form for pitchers, the same way that we did this for recent form for hitters. So now we want column Z here. So here we go. So we're going to go back to our pitchers, and we're just going to do a VLOOKUP. And it's kind of early in the year, so some of these numbers might be identical. But as more season comes along, obviously they will update. So B to Z, let's call it 25. I think it's 25. We'll test it in a second. Yeah, that's probably right. Let me just check this real quick. Bassett, 25. Yeah, okay, 27.5. So because it's so early in the year, let me see if they're all like this. No, a few have pitched outside of those 30 days. Okay. So there are a few guys, or at least it is very, very close. Their 2019 season average versus their 30-day average, because we are like 30 days into the season. There might be one start different for some of these guys, which is what you're seeing. So as the year grows longer, the difference between these numbers is probably going to change quite a bit. Right now, not necessarily the case. All right. So I want to check one thing really quickly here for Manny. Let's check and see if he is actually on this Fangraphs sheet or if he just hasn't pitched in. Yeah, okay. So he hasn't pitched. Sometimes they have different names, so that's what I was checking for here. And this is a small sample, so I imagine he hasn't either, but I'll check it. Okay, cool. So that's good. Good sign. Good sign, bad click there. Okay, here we go. So we're going to do the same thing here to clean this up. We're just going to say if error. Again, I like to show NQ, not qualified. That works for me. I don't necessarily care what you guys use, but that works for me. Looks a little bit cleaner than just that error sign. All right, so now we need to pull in opponent weight. And the way we're going to do that is via, I guess there's a couple ways we can do it. We're going to do it via team hitting stats. So we're going to pull in from Fangraphs. You can do it again by the season, by the last 30 days, by the last 14. I think we should probably do it by the last 14. If we are going to rank our hitters on a 14-day basis, we should probably rank our pitchers on the same basis. So again, that is up for you to decide how you want to weigh these guys, but I'll just do it via team hitting stats for the last 30 days. So again, back to Fangraphs, team batting stats for 2019. I should be able to switch this to last 14 is what I'll do. I've got the 2019 season, and it should just be a list of 30 teams, and it is. And then I just need to get the standard dashboard. So that is the table I'm going to pull over here, back into data, back into from the web. We will open this bad boy up. Give it a second here. All right, we're going to do this the same thing here. So table 1, we're going to transform this data. We're going to get rid of this first column, and we are going to calculate the DraftKings scoring here. Now, I've already done this, so let me go to recent form hitters and find, I'm going to grab this custom. This way I don't have to type the formula in again. I'm just going to grab the formula here, copy it, come back to my table, add a custom column, paste my formula in, and call this DraftKings. See if this works. Should all be the same format. Yeah, there we go. So what this is actually doing it by, though, let me think about this. And I guess it's okay. It's doing it by number of games, which is number of player games. So if 15 guys playing one game, that counts as 15 games. And doing it on average, that's fine, because as long as we're calculating everyone by the same thing, we should be good. So I'll do a decimal number, and we will call this team hitting. Okay. And we will load that up. We will update the name of our tab and change it to red. And then we will do the same thing that we have done before. So again, we're going to need to reference that function. Well, actually, we won't do that yet. So we'll do league average for DraftKings, and it's 4.58. So that's every player in the league averages 4.5 DraftKings points per game. So now we're going to do the same thing that we did for where are we here? Here we go, for the pitcher. So this is where we're going to look for the opponent, and then we're going to return actually the, not the pitcher this time, we're going to return the pitch weight here. So let's see if I can do this. So I'll just paste this in. So it's going to look for opponent first. If it cannot find opponent, it's going to look for our functions tab, which changes it back to the Fangraphs name. And we need to change probables to team hitting. And it is not going to be, it's going to be B to W. So team hitting B to W. And just to make sure I have something here, I'll put 2 in. So 175, did that actually work? 175 would have been here, Pittsburgh. Was that a Pittsburgh player first here? It was. Oh, okay, cool. That worked out. Okay, so just to kind of backtrack and explain that, we did the same thing, the nested VLOOKUP, where it looked for PIT, Pitt, in the team hitting table and did not find it because Fangraph uses the team nicknames. When it did not find it, it then referenced our functions tab and said, if you can't find Pitt, use Pirates. And Pirates use that to look up your team hitting. And when you find it, return the second column. That was a test. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So 22 is actually the DraftKings stat that we want to return here. So it should be like 4 or something. Oh, sorry, that was my bad. That was a misclick. You want 22 here in team hitting. There we go. So what that says is Pittsburgh players score 3.3 DraftKings points per game. Let's see if that's right. So Pittsburgh, 3.3. That is right. Okay. Now we're going to use Z1 as the league average. So what we will do is then take all of this and divide it by team hitting league average, which is here. And we will lock this cell down so that nothing changes. Boom. Okay. So now, all right, now what this is saying, as we take this step by step here, is the Pirates score 73% of the DraftKings points that the league average team does. That stinks. That says the Pirates stink, right? Okay. Now, the problem is that would then be a net. So remember how we calculate the projections. It's their recent form times the park weight times the opponent weight. But now this is actually a negative for the Pirates is a positive for the pitcher, right? So what we actually want to do is do, that is not right. 1 minus this whole thing, I believe, is what we're going to do. So there are probably much better ways to do this, but I'll show you how I'm going to do it. So again, this is the Pirates scoring 73% of the league average. I am going to do 1 minus this entire calculation and flip this around. So now it's going to be the opposite of this, right? So now the difference between 73% of the league average is this, basically 26% of the league average. And then I am going to do the whole thing again in parentheses and add a 1 to it. So now what this is basically saying, in kind of a roundabout way to get there, is pitchers against the Pirates should expect to score 26% more DraftKings points than the league average because the Pirates offense scores 26% less DraftKings points than the league average. Feel me? So that is kind of like the backwards way to get there. There are, again, probably better ways to do this. This is what I've done, and it works out pretty well for me. You can kind of tweak this any way that you want. So when we drag this down, you'll see there's a bunch of different, like Obviously, playing the Rockies is not ideal. Playing the Rangers not ideal, right? That's the opponent weight that we're getting into here. Park weight should still be the same. We wouldn't have to touch that because of so this is like hitters. So this is actually hitters score 5% more at PNC Park in Pittsburgh. So we do actually have to flip this because that is now a negative for pitchers. So I'll just do the same thing. 1 minus this entire calculation, and then this entire new calculation plus 1, which should give me the opposite, which is now, right, 94%. So Bassett gets a boost from playing the Pirates, but gets a little negative. He gets a huge boost playing the Pirates, but a little bit of a negative playing in Pittsburgh. Okay, so now when we go back to these projections, we are doing the same thing where we are averaging the opponent weight and the park weight and multiplying that by the last 30 days of DraftKings scoring. If the last 30 days does not exist, we are using the 2019 season. Again, in this case, it's pretty similar because we're, very, very early in the year. But you'll see there is this is a complete pitchers tab now, right? And you can see where there's value. Bassett, that's a small sample, and he gets a big boost from playing the Pirates, but that's why. Here is Corbin, who's projected to score 24 DraftKings points tonight against the Phillies, which would be 2.3 times his value. He gets a boost for playing against the Phillies and a boost for playing in Philadelphia. Rodriguez gets a boost for playing Cincinnati, but a negative for playing in Cincinnati. See how that works? To level itself out till you get to the actual projection. So that really is the pitchers tab. You should be ready to rock and roll with this version of it. Obviously, there are many tweaks, but those are your pitchers. I want to show you what to do when it's time to refresh this. So we'll start here on the salaries tab. This is old information from a few days ago. Just make sure that you have the queries and the connections open, and you want to go to your salaries query, and you can edit this and it'll pop up. This should look familiar to you. And remember, our original source was the DraftKings CSV for draft group ID 26828. So if you go into DraftKings, go to Major League Baseball, find what you want to play. For example, I'll play this 5-game slate and I'll open up any contest here. Do the same thing where you're just going to right click, or actually you can kind of see this if I bring this up here. So look down the bottom left-hand corner. As I hover over export to CSV, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner what the URL is that this would take me to if I were to click it. It's going to be exactly the same. The only difference is it says draft group ID 26943. That's all I need. So if I go back into Excel and do 943, is that what it was? 26943? Yes. Okay. So if I go back in and click OK, you'll see all of these should update, and they do. Now I've got May 9th, and all of my other steps continue to stay the same. So I'll just close and load this. So now it's going to load in my salaries data. Perfect. I'm going to refresh all, which will refresh all of the other sources that are coming into this sheet here. So we'll just give this a second. Depending on how fast your computer is, depending on how fast your internet connection is, this could take a minute or two, I suppose. You can see most of mine are already done. The only thing I'm waiting for, they're live lineups. Okay, well, that whole thing took 10 seconds to refresh. So now actually, if you go to your live lineups tab, if you've gotten that far, this is in the advanced portion of it, that information is updated. But if you just go to your hitters tab, you're going to see, well, first of all, a lot of these guys aren't playing today, but floors and projections have changed. So let's go through and do this. So what we need to do is clear out all of the old players here. So I'm just going to scroll down and do clear, and this should wipe everything. And then I'm going to go into my salary sheet, which is right here. I'm going to grab every player's name, copy it, come back into my hitters tab, paste them values only, and you'll start to see this fill up a little bit here. And give it a second here. And I actually had, depending on what your settings for Excel are, I actually had my park weights weren't coming through here when I updated. And the reason for that is this is the formula that you want here. So K2BI. Sometimes when you go through this and you just click and drag, it was looking for, it was a weird VLOOKUP. It was looking for exactly that name in that same spot, which is not what a VLOOKUP is going to do. So if you run into any issues there, let me know, but you should, that's probably not going to happen to you because you might not have the same version that I have here in the same settings. So now I've got all my players in here. I can start to get rid of my pitchers. I can filter by any types of players that I want. And these are pretty usable here. So that is how you refresh it. I'm just going to go through. There's a few other items I want to add to this sheet, but this is now very usable. You're basically ready to rock and roll here. So you are basically done your projections here. If you got this far, congratulations. That's awesome. Really all we're going to do a few more things here really quickly. So really when you come in every single day to refresh this, there's really not much you're going to need to do. You'll need to come into the probables sheet here in the queries, and you'll need to edit this source URL to be today, whatever today's date is. So if you come in tomorrow, you would change the 4 to a 5 and click OK, and everything else would load in. Then you would also come into salaries, and you would just make sure that for whatever slate you're playing, when you go to the DraftKings website, the group ID is whatever you want it to be. I don't know if it's going to be 26828 tomorrow, or if it's going to be 26829 or something like that. But for whatever night, all day, main, like whatever slate you want to play, you'll just plug that in there and click OK. And then really all you'll do is you'll close and load this. And then what you'll do is there's a big button up here that says refresh all. So when you refresh all of this, you'll see loading data, loading data, loading data. It's going out to all of the sources that we brought in, and it's grabbing all that data and it's loading it appropriately. Now, it's not going to change since the time that I just loaded it in when we started this a few hours ago. But this is a really good sign. Everything loads in as expected, and then all your other calculations would change along the way. So that's really it for the projections. We are going to do, you have a few more options here. I'm going to show you how to fix some of the names and discrepancies, like, for example, Pete Alonso on one site, Peter Alonso on another. I'm going to show you that at the end of the course right here. But I also am offering an advanced course. So if you go back to like the main courses page, and I'll make sure to include it in below so you can click a link to it, where we're going to do some more advanced stuff. So we're just going to continue off this sheet. So this is kind of prerequisite number 1. And we'll try to get some live lineup information into the database. We will try to get some weather information into the database if that is exciting for you. We'll pull Vegas odds. We'll do maybe some more advanced stats, and probably what I'll do is I'll put a weighting system in. So you can say, okay, I want to weigh recent form more than Ballpark, or I want to weigh a position in the batting order, or I want to weigh, like, you'll be able to choose that with sliders, and then it'll adjust the projections accordingly. Additionally, since baseball is such a volatile sport where the floors and the ceilings are so large, I don't love the idea of putting in just a solid projection here. What I want to do is I want to have basically like floor to ceiling projection. So I want to say like, okay, here's the projection, but 66% of the time, Cody Bellinger is going to score between these two numbers, or 96% of the time he's going to score between these two, and kind of do it like that. So we have a bit more of a range. And then what I also think would be cool is if we put in the games that were going to happen tonight, and what the projected scores are going to be using that Vegas data, and then really allowing you to adjust that. So if you think that, if the Angels are projected to score 4 runs tonight and you think they're going to score 7, that's going to, drastically impact Mike Trout's projections. So what we'll do is we'll build in where you can go through and update the scores for games or change anything like that, and your projections will also update if you have a hunch on the game or if you think something's a little bit off. So we will go through that in the advanced course. I will link it so that you have access to it. But congratulations on completing this course. We are just going to wrap with one more section of a little bit of data cleansing. The absolute biggest problem with making these projections from a bunch of different sources is that sometimes names don't match up across the sites. Team abbreviations do not match up across the sites. And if you've made it this far, you are aware of that. It is a huge headache that we try to, alleviate as much as possible. I have kind of built these in a way to be a little bit foolproof. So if you remember, if you built the sheet from 4 years ago, you would have remembered seeing a lot more errors on projections here. But because I used last 14 days from Fangraphs and 2019 from DraftKings, I covered my bases so that if one of those was valid, I would get a projection. Pete Alonso is the 1000% prime example of this for this season. Pete Alonso is qualified for his last 14 days. Almost certainly is. So I will go to recent form for hitters and type in Pete Alonso. And there he is. Because he is listed as Peter Alonso on Fangraphs, his last 14 days does not show up here. So now in the past, what I've done is my season long was also on Fangraphs. So if this name didn't match up, you had 0 projections. But the way that we built it this year with last 14 coming from Fangraphs and 2019 coming from the DraftKings salary tab, as long as one of those was accurate, sorry, I just want to freeze that. There we go. As long as one of those was accurate, we were in business. We were going to get a projection. So cool. All right. Now, just to kind of really make sure we're doing this properly, I would encourage you, and this is kind of what we did 4 years ago, is we started creating on the functions tab like a master sheet where it was like, name on Fangraphs, name on DraftKings, name on FanDuel, name on Baseball Reference. And we were just typing it all in, and as it was popping up, as new guys were popping up into the league or whatever, we would add them. Then I discovered this site. It is called crunchtimebaseball.com. I am not affiliated with this site in any shape or form, except for the fact that it is doing something that is awesome. So if you click on CSV, I'll download this really quickly so you can see what this looks like. It is going to show you this master sheet. They have done all the legwork of putting on every player currently on an active roster with their Major League Baseball ID, name, position, team, bats right, throws right, birth year, their Baseball Reference ID, name, CBS, ESPN, etc. This is like absolutely killer stuff here. The only thing that they're missing for our purposes, I believe, is DraftKings. they don't have the DraftKings name here. So this might not be very extremely valuable for us when it comes to trying to reference specific players, but this is a really, really cool sheet that I wanted to share with you. And you can do the same thing that we did for the DraftKings sheet at the very, very beginning, is if you just copy this link and import this link into Google Sheets as a master. So let's do this here really quickly. Every time it updates, you'll capture it because the URL isn't going to change. It's just always going to be master, which is so killer. So look at this. We're just going to load this in, and this is just going to be our master database in case we need to ever reference anything, right? We can just reference off of this. So I don't think it's actually going to, I'll put it right here, help us for this hitters tab. Because what I would do is I would create something for Pete Alonso that says, okay, if you can't find Pete Alonso, go out and check for Peter, but that master doesn't have a DraftKings tab. So that might be something that we add. But I will tell you that this master sheet is going to come in handy a lot in the advanced portion of this when we start getting into floors and ceilings, when we start getting into a lot, Vegas odds, because team names can be so different. So I wanted to share that with you in this video because I think the expectation is even if you do not come along in the advanced version of this, you are probably going to want to make some tweaks to this and kind of expand it yourself. And this master sheet is going to save you a lot of time. So I did want to include it here, even if we're not going to use it in this course, because I think it is something that you need to have, and it puts a nice little bow on the top of this course. So there you go. That is the 2019 version of the Major League Baseball projections sheet. It is very similar to the old sheet, but it is infinitely more efficient. The fact that everything is coming from an online source, as opposed to us trying to keep up, and we're doing calculations within Power Query instead of doing them all within the spreadsheet. This is a much more efficient build that is going to be easier to maintain over the course of the season and multiple years, because this can be used over multiple years. So really, really cool stuff. Again, we are going to get into some even deeper stuff. I can't wait to do like the floor and ceiling projections, which I love so much in baseball because of the volatility. I encourage you to join me in the advanced course. If you do not, all good. If you made it this far, it was a huge commitment. I really appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to me. If you're taking this course, I'll try to provide as much support as possible. You are certainly on the hook for updating this, but if you run into anything, let me know. You can tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or you can shoot me an email. It is info@dfsondemand.com. I will do my best to get back to you and provide as much support as possible. I really hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you guys soon.